Hello, everyone out there in Twitch land. I'm Carlos A.S. Lysing. Welcome to Castle Talk. With me tonight is a very special guest, the inimitable Jim Ward. Mr. Ward, how you doing today?
Hey, good. Thanks, buddy.
Awesome. Jim, everybody out there in Twitch land, let me speak for the whole community out there. I'm super glad that you could do this with us. I know everybody wants to see your face out there. Before we even get into anything, how are you feeling these days? How's everything
Uh,
going?
I'm okay. I have to go to the doctor 3 times a week now.
Oh,
I'm
man.
I'm kind of old and falling apart. It's just part of life. Diabetes has really kind of done me in. It's my own fault, but it isn't pleasant.
Yeah, you take it with a smile though, and I think that
I
that's
try to have a positive attitude.
that
I've seen lots of people have lots of worse stuff than me. So I
right.
just
Hey, listen,
don't.
before we go any further, everybody out there in the Greyhawk community, we're talking about the great drawmish over here, Jim Ward, and I think that it's important that we can support one of our own. So for those of you out there who are interested, you know, you can support Jim by contributing to his GoFundMe, as well as buying some of his products out there that he's creating these days. Uh, the it's an onerous debt that medical care costs these days. So anything that you guys can contribute would be very much appreciated by Mr. Ward. I'm sure of that. Jim, so why don't you tell me about some of the things that you're doing right now as far
Uh,
as current products?
I got tonnage of stuff. So let me hit a couple of the websites.
Right
I've
on.
got firesidecreations.com.
Okay.
They have the Lost 77 Worlds, and they have Dragon Scales. Dragon Scales is a fantasy game, and Lost 77 Worlds is a science fiction game. And I've got like 8 or 9 products for each of that one. And then
Outstanding.
coming out next year is the Forgotten Ruins. That's a fantasy role-playing game that Nick Cole and Jason, I can never pronounce his last name, but anyway, they're novelists out of California, and they're going to give away the Forgotten Ruins on their website so that you'd be interested in seeing their novels.
Oh, that's amazing.
I think that's an interesting approach.
That is a
And
really cool approach. I like
yeah,
that.
too. I think so too. And then right now I'm working on a thing called Giant Lands. I'm very excited about it. It's apocalyptic fantasy, so that's a title that's never been done before. And the people I'm working with want to turn it into a theme park.
That is awesome.
Oh my goodness, it is
Can
so
you
awesome.
imagine?
It has a website too called Giant Lands. You can look it up. It has a Facebook page. But I just finished the rules and an adventure that we're going to run at Gamehole in Madison and GaryCon in Lake Geneva. But I'm very, very excited about the idea of it.
That's fantastic. So, are you going to actually be at Game Hole here?
I'm running 3 events at Gamehole. Yeah, you
Oh,
bet.
fantastic. I'll get a chance to see you there.
Yep, let's do.
One of my viewers right now is mentioning, first of all, hey, Gaetano, that Lost 77 Worlds has some pretty cool stuff. I have the quick play of it that I played,
Oh,
and I was very impressed too.
well, I use a deck of cards, which is very unusual.
Yeah.
And the red cards are all positive events, and the black cards are all negative events. So you can learn the game in 5 seconds.
Yeah. That's the beauty of some of the stuff that I've seen that you've done. Your game design is really elegant. It has, it's not like it's so cumbersome that it detracts from the experience, and I think that's really important.
I was a teacher for 5 years, so I like to keep things simple. I really do, and I think I do that in my rules.
Awesome. So where can we buy your stuff at for everybody out there that wants to support you?
Okay, so for sure, firesidecreations.com,
Okay.
and that has a website and that has a Facebook page.
Outstanding.
Yeah,
Outstanding.
they're selling product right now. And then what else is going to? I mean, Giant Lands won't be selling till GaryCon. That's in March.
Hmm.
And the Forgotten Ruins, that stuff's all given away free.
Oh, that's so awesome.
That hasn't happened yet. It's going to happen at the beginning of the year. Those guys are really talented authors. They did what's it called? Edge of the Galaxy. Edge of the
Hmm.
Galaxy. Anyway, really talented authors.
You're not too shabby yourself. I should go on to say.
Oh, well, thank you very much. It's very kind of you.
You
I'm
know,
not
some of the things I don't know that the audience really out there knows that you've done in the past too would be the storyteller's thesaurus.
Oh, that's my masterwork.
I
That's
think so too. I think that bears mention. Could you tell everybody a little bit about that?
no problem. The Cholord boys came to me and said that we really need something that helps define games and gaming and helps the author. And so we came up with this idea of doing a very special thesaurus. And the thesaurus gives you different categories to look up. So if you want to look up horror, you can look under the chapter of horror and you'll get a bunch of ideas for horror products, horror monsters, horror ideas. If you want to look up treasures, you get a bunch of historical ideas for the different treasures down through the ages and fantasy treasures. We have a thing about magical swords. So basically, it's just a place to look up interesting ideas, and we have many different categories. And so, if you want to find out what kind of bread you should put in your game, we have like 100 different types of bread in the thesaurus.
It is absolutely an indispensable document for people who want to write adventures and publish. For my viewers out there, where can you buy the Storyteller's Thesaurus?
That's at the Troll Lord website.
Right.
Or at a convention that they go to. In fact, I forgot to mention, the Troll Lord is going to produce my Starship Warden, 600 pages of the Starship Warden and all the maps that went to it for my game 40 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. They're going to do a Kickstarter in December, and you can get it in the spring.
Do you hear that out there? That's breaking news. You guys can get in on the ground floor of that. That sounds like it's going to be amazing. Also, for those of you guys who will visit different conventions, my good friend Alan Grohe at Black and John Hirschberger at Black Blade Publishing also do a lot of the Metamorphosis Alpha stuff they carry. So if you want to purchase it there, you can also do it there. Just approach those guys, and whatever you guys can do, remember, support Jim's products and the different stuff he's doing. Jim is a great creator from the old school. He's one of those members of the old guard that we all adore out there. He's one of the most beloved figures in the industry. But at the same time, he's still doing relevant work. So it's important for all you guys to know that these guys aren't just an artifact of your childhood. Jim's still doing very relevant work that resonates today and doing stuff that I use as a publisher today, like the Storyteller's Thesaurus, that really helps improve my product. So, Jim, thank you so much for doing all that. And
it's kind of you to...
Oh, please go ahead.
No, it's kind of you to say. That's great. Thank you.
Oh, no problem at all, man. I wouldn't say if it wasn't true. This is Castle Talk, as everybody knows over here, and we're geared towards if the big picture of Mordenkainen in the background wasn't good enough to tell you guys, we're really here focusing on the world of Greyhawk. So I wanted to kind of introduce that whole topic. Jim has a perspective of being able to view Greyhawk through the lens of actually playing in the campaign, and he's an integral figure in its history. Jim, can we talk a little bit about how you were introduced to Greyhawk at first?
Sure, no problem. So the time is 1974. I just graduated from college, and every Tuesday I go to Lake Geneva to the Lake Geneva bookstore to get their science fiction and fantasy paperbacks. And so I'm in there on a Tuesday, and I'm grabbing a Conan, and I'm grabbing a Poul Anderson, and so I wind up with 7 books. And I look beside me, and this biker dude, he's got this blue jean jacket, he's got a rough beard, he's got worn blue jeans. He has the exact 7 books. And so we looked at each other, and we kind of smiled, and we started talking about how we love reading and the different topics. And he told me that he had a game where I could play Conan the Barbarian and fight Set. I was hooked. I was hooked, line, and sinker. I went over to learn how to play the game at Gary Gygax's house, and for 30 years we played the game and had a great time.
Oh my gosh, how magical is that? I mean,
oh my goodness, is it ever?
You want to talk about the vicissitudes of fate putting you two together. That's amazing.
Well, I'll tell you, that guy, I've never seen a DM that was better than Gary. Never, ever.
He was just DM number 1. He will always be DM number 1.
Yeah, I have to agree. And his stuff is still better than anybody else's today, I'll tell you.
Well, all praise is for putting you two together.
Yeah.
What when you first started playing, Jim? What were your first impressions of the game itself, of D&D itself, and of the Greyhawk campaign?
Okay, well, it was like sitting on a movie. I mean, not a movie set, a movie. Gary was so good at describing things. I mean, our first adventure, we went to Kong Island and saw King Kong and explored the island. I know it was we got in on a lot of module adventure playtesting, which was just great fun. But he made the city come alive. We could walk down the streets of the city, and you could just see the things happening in the city place. His dungeon was unbelievable. I mean, we explored it for 30 years and never even came close to seeing everything that's in it. It's just amazing.
Wow, that is incredible. Um,
It was.
I mean, everybody, the stories that we hear, everybody gathers around in the community, gathers around the campfires in the various Greyhawk groups, and we talk about these different things. They're hallowed subjects to us. You lived them. I mean,
Oh,
that's the most amazing thing to me is I can't even imagine what it would have been like to sit there and see Gary break out with loose leaf paper for the first time, Tomb of Horrors.
oh, it was grand. I'll tell you, it was a big deal.
Now, for everybody out there that knows you in the Greyhawk community, a lot of people know you as Drawmij from your the anagram version of your name, but I
Hmm.
don't know that a lot of people really actually know the story that Drawmij wasn't always Drawmij.
No,
Could
it
you
was
explain that a
on.
little bit?
I went. Gary made the name Dramage. Gary loved to take people's names and reverse them. Just loved to do it. So he started me. I started out as Bombadil backwards because I really
Backwards was
loved.
his last name.
No, I'm sorry.
Oh,
The name
his spell.
Bomb,
Oh, I get it. Yeah, he backwards your name.
it was Little Mob backwards, and I started out with that. But as I played the game, I would complain because I really loved being a wizard. I would complain about spells that I really needed. And one day I said, you know what? I really need a spell where I'm in the dungeon and I know that I have a Wanderer potion in my room back at the inn that I'd like to summon to my hand. And Gary said, well, yes, you can do that, but you know what? You can't do that. Dramage can do that. Dramage, who's Dramage? And then I finally realized it was my name backwards. I said, okay, if that's the way you want it. So I started developing spells that my wizard used that Dramage created.
That's even cooler because honestly, the way I understood it, I thought that Drawmij was an artifact later of because they just wanted to avoid IP issues with Bombadil, with Tom
Oh,
Bombadil, possibly from Lord of the Rings.
yeah, sure,
I
no.
didn't realize that actually that was the genesis of it. So that's
Oh,
really cool. Out there right now in the audience, I just got a hello from the inimitable Anna Meyer, who's
oh,
doing amazing Greyhawk maps. I know Anna, you know James as well, so or James as well. So that's awesome that you can see this, and we can all learn a little bit from Jim. Um, so you didn't have any problem at all with the fact that
let me give you a fun Dramage story.
awesome.
Okay, so I've left TSR. I'm doing my own little company called Fast Forward. And so I do a couple big fun adventures, and I put Dramage in the adventures as kind of the mentor of the group that assigns the quest. Okay, and so it sold great. Everybody wanted it, and Wizards of the Coast sent me a cease and desist letter.
Oh,
They said, no, we own Dramage. That's our trademark, and nobody but us can use it. I couldn't believe it. I mean, it was my name.
that is so weak. Oh
I
my
was
goodness.
shocked.
It reminds me a little bit of the cease and desist that the Gygax brothers got for Gygax magazine. I mean, come
Yeah,
on, it's
yeah,
their name. You got to
yeah.
be
I
able to
know.
let somebody
Exact
have
same thing.
that.
Yeah. So I was stunned. I have to tell you. So we had to stop selling it, and it was kind of a too bad thing. But it really kind of grates on me that I can't use my own name in a product.
Oh, of course. Have you done anything to have you changed it at all? Maybe to avoid IP, like do something with Drawmage, like maybe add an I in there or change something.
Okay. I hear you. No, I haven't done that. I've completely not done Drawmage, but I had another character, a half-elf character called Ren of the Blade, and it got used in 5 or 6 different products.
Right.
So now Ren of the Blade that I use is WREN.
Oh, okay, I get you. That's awesome. Now,
Yeah,
as far as Drumish goes, interestingly enough, I wrote a story not long ago. It was I'm doing this thing for Figurines of Wondrous Power, and I wrote it partially for my wife, but Drumish is actually one of the driving forces in there. I'll have to share it with you at some point in time. It was kind of an homage to you a little bit that I never really showed you because I was a little self-conscious. But now that I know a little bit about this, maybe I shouldn't have been.
How high of a level was your Drummond?
I had Drumish at 14th.
Okay, that's good. That's the level I finished at Gary's game.
Right, I did my research on it, and that's why I put him there. Now,
There we
I
go.
actually have heard a rumor that you were actually the highest level at one point Magic user that was ever in Gary's game. Is that true?
Yes, I was. Yes, I was. I'm very proud of that fact.
I am very proud of you for that fact, too, because I know how squishy Magic users can be at low levels, because I play them, too. What were your strategies? How did you stay alive?
Well, I stayed alive by having all the other players in the game were 4th and 5th and 6th level when I was 1st level. So it kind of protected me. I had this real sweet sleep spell that everybody loved because you get all the low-level characters with it. But
Right.
yeah, they protected me, and so and they did 4th and 5th level things. So we got lots of experience, lots and lots, and so that's how I started leaping forward in things. But Gary didn't like wizards. He thought they were too powerful, and he
And yet
designed.
his main character was Mordenkainen.
Yeah, I know. He did not like wizards.
I think that's funny. Did you?
Yes.
How long did it take? I've got a question out there from my audience about how long did it take you in gameplay to get to 14th level?
Oh, forever, like 30 years.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, 30 years.
Wow.
Like a year before Gary passed away was when I got my 14th level.
I did not know that.
That's a lot of experience.
It is a lot of experience. And, back in the day, they had a way, you guys all had a way of truncating level gain. Gary was a master at making sure that you guys stayed at a reasonable level, I think.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, he had lots of level drainers in his game.
Exactly. I think that's mostly what I meant.
Yeah.
Between that and character deaths and raised deads and things like that, I'm sure.
Flash, oh my goodness, we got turned to stone so many times. I bet I got turned to stone 4 different times.
Really? As Litmob?
No, yeah, well, as the wizard in the game.
Right.
After a while, it kind of blended into Drummage.
Okay, right on. Okay, that's cool. Let's talk. I want to talk a little bit about how you actually got the assignment to write for World of Greyhawk. Was it Gary actually that gave you the assignment?
Well, are we talking about the hardbound or something else?
We'll talk about your entire experience with the World of Greyhawk.
Okay, so while Gary was still at TSR, I would write what people wanted or needed. So I was kind of the pitch hitter.
Okay.
So when we couldn't find a designer to do a piece of work, they got me to get it done. But the hardbound was a whole different deal. Gary had left the company, and we needed some cash real quick. So they gave me 3 months to do a 6-month job.
Yeah.
And I had lots of help doing it, but that's how the hardbound got done.
I read this hardbound. I've got it right over here next to me as we speak. For those of you who don't know what Mr. Ward's talking about right here, this is the Greyhawk Adventures hardback. There is so much cool stuff in there, from the cleric individual spells like Istis's Vicissitude to the Change Cat that you created, which ended up being a familiar of my favorite character that I ever created. So you've directly influenced my personal favorite character that I ever had in that way. I mean, all those interesting area-specific magical items. How long did it take you to write that hardback? From birth to death.
We were only given 3 months.
That's what I'm talking about. That is an astounding feat, as far as I'm concerned.
Really is. I had lots of other designers help me with that product, but it was silly. We really should have had 6 months, but it was a cash crunch for the company. That was the last AD&D hardbound that they did.
It was.
It sold 60,000 units like in 2 weeks.
The one that you just saw me hold up was purchased in Greece when I was in the Air Force. I was stationed in Crete, and I got it from the bookstore that we had, the military bookstore that we had there. So your work actually went around the world at that point in time, and young
Oh,
Young Carlos Lysing picked it up over there when I was in Greece and was astounded from it at that point in time.
oh
So
well. Yeah, a lot of good stuff in that book.
yeah, I absolutely love it. In fact, I mentioned to you before we went on the air that my wife is really taken with a particular location and that I may or may not be visiting in the future with your blessing. So that'll be really cool.
I
Now,
see.
Jim, I'd like to talk about a little bit about your role in developing the whole world of Greyhawk. Um, you did the all the Greyhawk Adventures thing for sure, and that was such a formative piece. But um, I want to talk a little bit about deities and demigods a bit, and gods,
Yes.
demigods, and heroes.
Yes.
Um, you wrote both of those books, and there is some stuff that actually from those that actually made it into the world of Greyhawk, like the non-human deities. All right, but
Yep.
before we even cross that bridge, since we're talking about deities and demigods, there's a lot of controversy about the whole Melniboné mythos and the Cthulhu mythos. I want
Yes.
you to be able to tell everybody right now, for the record, authoritatively, we're on the air. This is going to be a public record forever on YouTube. Let them know what really happened.
Okay, so I'll keep it short.
Okay.
First of all, it really pushes my button when people say that I plagiarized those two mythos by not getting official sanction to do them. Here's what happened. So we're gonna do deities and we're gonna do gods, demigods, and heroes. No, we did gods, demigods, and heroes. I'm doing deities and demigods, and Gary says there might be some copyright problems with the Cthulhu and with the Melniboné pantheons.
Yeah, it was
And I
hard for me to say too.
said, yeah. And I said, what do I have to do to fix this? And he says, why don't you write the two parties involved and get a written hard letter from each one. And so that's exactly what I did. I wrote Michael Moorcock, and he admitted that I wrote it on several interviews of his, admitted that he sent me permission.
I watched one on YouTube just this morning.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Well, there, good. And then, what is the name? Arkham House. I wrote Arkham House and said, can we please have permission to do this? And we'll talk about your books if you let us do it. And they said, fine, too. And both of those people had written a contract with Chaosium to do role-playing games on those two IPs, intellectual properties. And so we did Deities and Demigods, and we put it out, and the first edition sold really well. Everybody just loved it. We sold out in like 2 weeks because they thought it was just a cool, fun thing to do. And they loved those two pantheons like the most of all of them because that caused people to go to those books,
Yep.
to go to Lovecraft books or Michael Moorcock books and really enjoy those novels. And so I want to say it's like 3 months later, we got this letter from Chaosium, the cease and desist letter. And they said, we own it, we own the titles. And they did own the titles. I don't give them a bit of criticism. They did the right thing. They made a contract, that's what you're supposed to do. But we also had letters from those two groups that said we could do it too.
Right.
So Brian Bloom was the boss at that time, and we had the letters. We would have won in a court of law hands down, but he would have had to go to California. He would have had to hire a California lawyer, and he would have had to go to court. And they didn't want to spend the money. So they just stripped it out. And then I said, okay, if you strip it out, that's fine. I will give you 2 more pantheons free. No problem. You don't have to pay me. No, we're not going to do that. It was a terrible, hurtful thing that I really disliked. And so now, every single year, we get a couple clowns on the Greyhawk board or the AD&D board that say that TSR plagiarized those two guys and stole those 2 trademarks. Couldn't be further from the truth. I'd rather die than plagiarize something. So that's the whole story.
Yep. It breaks my heart that people still perpetuate the fact that you might have plagiarized those 2 things, because anybody that knows that you're a man of integrity, and I know that you would never do such a thing. So
Drives me insane. It's insane.
Yeah, it's crazy. I have one of our viewers out there, my good friend Tim over there from the Lord Gavin's Peak and from the Lord Gasumba channel is out there saying hello. So hello. Hi Tim, how you doing? Thanks for joining in. I have also another watcher out here who mentions this. This is my friend Gaetano, one of my great supporters and an all-around great guy, who says, "I heard Chaosiums being okay with deities and demigods was a part of the reason on how they were able to get AD&D stats in their Thieves World box about a year later."
I don't know anything about
Yeah,
that.
so that might have whether I don't. That's the first time I've ever heard of it too. So that's an interesting anecdote if that's true or not.
Hmm.
Um, Now, going back to deities and demigods' actual content, now that we've set the record straight out there, and all you clowns out there who want to get on the Greyhawk board have heard it from the man himself, so enough. The man did not
Yes, really.
plagiarize the stuff. Now you know the whole story.
Yes.
As far as the content itself goes, though, a lot of things that you did with the I want to talk about the non-human area a little bit,
Yeah,
particularly for
sure.
two reasons. And the
Hmm.
reason being Clorelian Larethian, excuse me, and Grumish, the two deities, the elves and the orcs,
Hmm.
respectively, the heads of
Yeah.
the pantheons. Those two gods have become very, very important into the world of Greyhawk because
Hmm.
they're leaders of the pantheons, and they make plenty of appearances in Greyhawk stuff.
Hmm.
Can you tell me a little bit about how you decided that you want to design the non-human deities, what your kind of your design aesthetic was, and
Sure. So Gary wanted those in the book.
mhm.
As I was doing an outline, what I did, let me just get rid of this little weird thing here. Come on. Gary, okay. Um, so I gave Gary the outline for the whole product, and he says, I want those inhuman deities in the game, and he gave me a couple names like the orc one and the elf one, and he says, go wild with them, just invent whatever you want. So and that's what I did. I just out of my butt and my head, I put together those pantheons, and Gary liked them a lot. He On every single pantheon, I sent it to Gary. Gary approved or disproved it. He and I never argued much with Gary because he was kind of the final word on things. The only time we ever had a big argument was the hit points for the gods. I wanted to give 1,000 hit points to the head of the gods. Gary says absolutely not, because you're not killing them. You're just wiping their spirit out from that plane, but they go back to their own planes and they're reborn again. So you're never killing a god, which I thought was a good approach myself. So that was the only thing we ever really argued about. I wanted to give him lots more hit points. He didn't have a problem with the power levels of the weapons that we gave because they were godlike weapons. He didn't have a problem with the monsters that we tossed in there. All that stuff he thought was just fine.
I must say, having read it as a young boy and thinking to myself that even a 10th level fighter has the opportunity to have well over 100 hit points. I always thought that the hit points were a little too low too. So I think heresy here, but I actually side with you over Gary on that one. I think the hit points are a little low.
What a wise person you are.
Especially because Gary's not here to defend himself, right?
Oh,
you know, I wonder what it's like a little bit when you're writing this stuff. Did you have any idea how it would be responded to by? I mean, back then, I think it's hard for people that are newer players to remember. Being 49 myself, I remember what it was like, what a craze D&D had become in the late 70s and early 80s. Did you have any idea when you were writing any of this game material how it would be viewed in the future, in future days to come?
okay, a fun little story.
Okay.
I'm working on this thing night and day over the summer because I'm a teacher and I teach during the spring and the fall. And I'm working on it night and day. And my wife says, "Boy, you sure are working on this very hard. Do you know what's going to happen?" And we didn't know what was going to happen. So my first royalty check, 60 grand.
Woo!
Yeah, 60 grand.
By inflation too, that's huge.
It was very huge. I stupidly spent it all, so I had a tax. I owed 20 grand in taxes, and I didn't save a penny back to do it. It wasn't good.
No, but you know what? I think I would probably have made the same mistake. I think everyone back then was a little bit flush with how things were going. I think it's an easy mistake to
Yep.
make.
It was just a license for printing money. The sales were so good for several years.
Um, as far as sales go, we're going to talk about that a little bit later because there's one topic I really want to talk about, which is your association with Spellfire. But we'll get to that in a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, as far as going back to the Greyhawk Adventures hardcover again,
Mhm.
um, when you wrote that thing, TSR was a very different company than when you started. There was a lot of change. Gary was out of the company. Could you actually tell me a little bit about what the climate was like? Could you what was the air within the company like at that point in time?
Okay, that's not a happy story. We had Lorraine Williams as the head of the company. She didn't like role playing. She didn't want to do role playing. She was going to lead the company into Hollywood and the mass market. And it just didn't happen. You can't make a sow's ear into a silk purse.
Yeah,
I mean, TSR had a certain image and a certain reputation, and we were great at what we did for a billion years. She didn't want it. She didn't want to work on it. I don't know what she thought. I mean, she invested $3 million, and she wound up with $30 million. So as a business investment, she did great. But she killed the company. She sent it to Wizards, and Wizard changed it. It wasn't good. It was not a nice situation for a long time there. Gary and her worked together, but then Gary got booted, and then Lorraine just turned it into something that wasn't good.
yeah. As far as a creator, did you feel stifled within the environment? How was the editing? I mean, did you feel like
All
you
right,
were
so
having a hard time getting things through?
okay, you're about to see an ugly chunk of ego. I was the ranger that protected the hobbits. In other words, I was the vice president of production, and we had to get stuff out, so I made sure we did. But Saruman and the evil empire kept trying to get in the way, and I kept stopping it time after time after time. So I made sure the trains ran on time. I made sure we did lots of different products in lots of different ways. Because really, TSR, when we had our different intellectual properties, it was like fishing. You did Ravenloft, you tried for the horror crowd, and you did Boot Hill, and you tried for the Western crowd. We had lots of IPs like that,
Right.
and they did a great job. You just had to support them. If you didn't support them, then people didn't bother playing them. So we were really good at supporting stuff and put out tons of product every year. But the debt really creeped up on us for lots of different reasons, lots of ugly different reasons.
You bring up a good point there about if you don't nurture these settings and things like that, these games, that people aren't going to be interested or want to play them. That's one of the great tragedies of what's happening now with Greyhawk being bereft of official support from the company who owns the IP.
Yeah.
That's a subject for a little bit later that going on though. Um, as far as as far as Greyhawk goes and the way that you created the things that you created for it, could you tell me a little bit about your design philosophy with respect to Greyhawk? What are the key elements that you include in there to make it feel Greyhawk? What are the
Oh,
things that you got to have to be Greyhawk?
okay, and lots of people aren't going to agree with this, but for me, the Monty Hallness of the IP is important. Gary Gary had to playtest every single magic item and every single spell that he put in that game. So in a short amount of time, in 2 or 3 years, he had to do a ton of playtesting, which made him a Monty Hall referee. And I'm the same way. I like giving out tons of magic, tons of gold, because it's tough. That world is tough, and it gets tougher the higher level you get. So for me, it's high level play. I really like playing in the higher levels, and all my designs are very deadly high level games. That's the way I like to play, and I warn people as I do tournaments at conventions. If you survive to the end of this quest, you've won. You've done a good job. Unfortunately, hardly anybody survives until the end of the quest. So
I think your Metamorphosis Alpha games in particular have a particular reputation out there in the community at conventions. What's your
okay,
motto about that again?
my motto is I don't kill player characters. Players kill player characters.
I have a little button that says that with your name attributed to that quote. That's why I brought that up.
Yeah. I didn't do that button. That button was for charity. That's
Right.
the only reason it got done.
That's fantastic. As far as the Greyhawk Adventures book goes, could you tell me some of the things that you're proud of creating in there, and some of the things maybe you regret a little bit about the way the design went?
Oh, I'm happy to say I don't regret it. Well, I'll take that back. I'm most proud of zero level characters.
Okay.
I think it was a great idea. I think it was an idea whose time has come. They still, I mean, they don't do it anymore, even now. Zero level characters is a really good idea for you to sample a bunch of things and figure out exactly what you want to do. It's like going to college and having to take a bunch of different courses to see which one you're good at.
Right.
So zero level characters for me, but we didn't play test them enough. We should have play tested them more. But like I said, 3 months, you can't do a lot of play testing in 3 months. The creatures, I love the creatures. Like the Greyhawk Dragon. Oh my goodness.
Oh yeah.
Just a fun creature. There's a lot of fun creature ideas in there.
I can tell you that there's a lot of people in my games that play in there that will, if you ever tell them that you're the one who created the Sword Wraith, that they're going to give you some ugly stares. +3 or better to hit, plus strength drain? Are you kidding me?
Yeah. So I like the creatures and I like the zero level characters. Drawage spells, of course. You know, gotta love those.
Yeah, absolutely.
I kind of put him on the map. He wasn't really as famous until that came out.
Yeah, I think that anyone who knows about the Circle of Eight knows a little bit about Drawmage. In recent years, he's been characterized in a particular way. They've done some interesting things with him that make him kind of memorable that I don't know that you would either approve or disapprove of, but we'll talk about that here in a few moments.
Okay. Actually, Zeb Cook put him in the Circle of Eight. He wasn't originally in the Circle of Eight. Mm-hmm. Zeb's a good guy.
He makes sense though there for sure.
No, I agree.
As far as the current state of the world of Greyhawk, you know, you're a member of the old guard, you're a veteran game designer, and given your history with the setting, your opinion of it holds a great deal of weight. I know not only with me, but with the rest of the people out there in the community. Do you really keep up much with current Greyhawk products at all?
No, not at all. I stopped dealing with Wizards of the Coast a while back.
Yeah.
It made me sad. They dropped all the IPs. Well, they didn't drop them. They own them still, but they're not doing anything with them. Which that isn't the way I do it.
No, not me either. And in fact, that's what inspired me to create Castle Entertainment, and everything that you see from the chat that you're in right now to the different things I do is I didn't want it to die. I mean, it was such an important part of my life that, and such a formative experience to me that there was no way I was letting it go like that. I wanted people to be able to play the kind of adventures in Greyhawk that I wanted to play, and it was so that's why I did it. So I'm with you 100%. It's a tragedy that they're not supporting it directly.
It is really.
As far as Greyhawk fandom goes, well, first of all, let me go back to the Drawmage thing a little bit. Right now, what they've done with Drawmage is he is kind of a Captain Nemo style character. He's very interested in the water, and he has a very large apparatus of Qualish that he communicates with sea creatures and gets intelligence from whale songs and things like that. And he also has been dabbling a little bit in time magics lately, which has made him seem like he's a little bit distracted because they've implied that he's actually living in multiple, maybe ahead of the time stream a little bit.
Kind of like Merlin the Wizard?
Yes, a little bit. So I don't know if you would approve or disapprove of those things, but that's sort of what they've done with Drawmage post you.
He was definitely headed towards interdimensional things, that's for sure. Because he got a couple devices from Gary that would allow him to go into the other dimensions. Another interesting story. So the first time we dimension walked, we went to another dimension, and all of our weapons turned to loaves of bread. We were very unhappy. Very, very unhappy. We didn't know if we could eat them or what we should do with them. But yeah, we didn't have any weapons. They were all loaves of bread.
That is, I don't know if that's the height of cruelty or the height of genius, but that's exactly what I was talking about him having a way of truncating power levels.
Yes. You know, you think we're a big deal. Oh, we can dimension walk now. Yeah, well, sorry, your +5 Vorpal Blade is a loaf of bread.
Oh my goodness. I don't even know what you're going to, I don't even know what you say to that. That's terrible.
I know!
Now, as far as, actually, you know, I have a viewer out here by the name of Dan Gormansk who is going. It's Dan Gormansky, my good buddy Dan. I had to go
Good.
real fast with all that. Hey Dan, thanks for watching. He mentions the deadliness of your adventures. He says that goes way back to the Pharaoh's Tomb in the Dungeoneer magazine. Jaques warned that it was deadlier than his adventures. So,
Well, that gets old if he remembers the Dungeoneer magazine.
yeah, he's Dan is a dear
I-
friend, and he's an old schooler like us.
Oh yeah, I love that magazine. I started putting articles in it all the time. It just was very enjoyable.
Jim, my friend Gaetano talking about your story about the loaves of bread. He goes, "Wow, at least the weapons were still worth a lot of dough."
That's very good. Tell him it's very funny.
Oh boy. I don't know whether to thank you or to kick you off my chat right now, Gaetano. Anyway,
Well typed.
very well typed. Now
Yeah.
going back to your to what we were talking about the world of Greyhawk and its current state. Now there's a lot of published material out there, and you meet a lot of people, I'm sure, that are fans of Greyhawk. What do you think some of the maybe the biggest misconceptions that people have about the way the original campaign was against maybe the way that they perceive it, or that it's written in canon form in the books?
Well, I don't have a lot of answers to that one.
Okay.
I think people thought it was tough. I mean, that's for sure. Gary was real good at spreading the word about his world. I think maybe they also don't want to look at other worlds once they're exposed to Greyhawk. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, Forgotten Realms is way cool. Ravenloft, way cool. But if you're a Greyhawk fan, you don't do much traveling in other IPs. You just don't.
No, I mean you mentioned a little bit about the high level play and some of the Monty Hallness of it. And you talked about playtesting. You mentioned playtesting to me a little bit earlier in the before we actually went on air about playtesting Tomb of Horrors.
Yeah.
I think the crowd would be interested in hearing a little bit about that. Tell them what your experience in Tomb of Horrors was actually like.
Okay, so Gary deliberately set out to make a module that would end the power gamers. That anybody who went in there, doesn't matter what high level he was, doesn't matter if he was a god, he'd walk in there and he'd get nailed.
Right.
Time after time after time. And so he had to play test it. And so his crowd, he warned everybody, this is made to be purposely really hard to play in to answer the question of the power gamers. And so we said, okay, well, everybody's fine with that. And so different groups went in doing different stuff. And so I heard some of the stories of how deadly the traps were, and I didn't want to get nailed by these traps. I want to say I was like a 10th level wizard with a couple flunkies, and so we got on our magic carpet, and we carpeted into the Tomb of Horrors, and so I missed out on, like, I want to say 3/4 of the deadliness of the tomb because I didn't trip a single trap, I didn't fall in any pits. I was fine. The only problem with that is I also didn't get to the biggest treasure, because the biggest treasure is in a pit through a secret door. Right. Well, I never went in that pit. But I said to myself, hey, I survived the Tomb of Horrors. Well, yeah, I survived, but I didn't go to the biggest, bestest part.
As a game designer, how do you feel about Tomb of Horrors? I mean, it's a controversial module. Some people say it's way too tough. But to me, it sounds like it fulfilled the purpose exactly what it was supposed to design for its design. But how do you feel about it? Do you think it was?
That's a great question. Here's the deal. I've been trying for a good 20 years now to make my own version of the Tomb of Horrors, to make something so tough and so deadly that everybody would go, oh man, this is not good. This is poor game design. I haven't succeeded. I've made lots of really tough dungeons, really hard undead dungeons, trap filled dungeons. I did a series called the Monty Hall Towers, and so the treasures were fantastic in the tower, but the traps and deadliness was big deal too. So I really my lifetime goal is to make something as good as the Tomb of Horrors. I don't know if I'll ever do it, but I keep trying. Every year I do something. Right now I'm doing the Tower of Lost Items. It has what happens is everybody as they play the game has lost an item that's really near and dear to them.
Oh,
So you walk in the door, and this great big demonic looking guy says, "All right, what have you lost?" And you have to tell him. You can tell him anything you want. 3-wish ring, the Apollo staff. It doesn't matter what you say. It's going to be there, but the price you pay for getting it is going to be really. It's going to be equal to how big the item is. So if it's, I lost a little ruby ring. Okay, you're gonna fight a gorilla and maybe a small dragon. But if it's, I lost a 3-wish ring, or I lost a 6-wish ring, you're going to be fighting big, tough, ugly things.
oh, for sure, for sure.
Yeah,
One of
so
my watchers right now, Grog Talk, who I believe is my friend James. Hey, Carlos, took me a bit to sign up because I didn't want to miss anything. Thanks so much for having Jim on. What a treasure to listen to.
Oh,
Um,
that's great of him. Tell
yeah,
him thank
James is a good guy. James and my friend Dan, who I mentioned earlier, are the masterminds behind GrogCon. This was
Oh,
their first GrogCon that they had down in Florida, and it was a
oh,
smashing success.
neat. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, they're two good guys, and they deserve all the success that they
The
get.
Fireside Creation, Stephen Lee, is down in Florida. That's where his base is.
Okay,
Yeah,
very cool.
yeah. Good.
James would also like to ask you, please ask him about his visit to SSI in 1989 and the Gold Box. Could you tell us some stories about that?
You betcha. It's. I'm gonna probably wear you out time wise here, but
Oh, no,
uh,
you're not. I've got plenty of time. I can talk
uh,
to you all day, Mr. Ward, believe me.
so here's the deal. Um, I was into games and computer games at TSR, and so one day I said to the bosses, I said, "Hey, we need to get a computer company to do D&D games," and they loved the idea. They said, "Okay, Jim, send out some letters, see what you can get." So I sent out 5 letters to the 5 biggest computer game companies, and only Electronic Arts and SSI responded. And so Electronic Arts came out, and it was one of their directors there, and he pitched a good line, and he said, "Yeah, we can easily do a game a year, and we can easily write checks for 100 grand, no problem at all." And so we were very impressed by his presentation, and so SSI was going to come the next week, and we all felt kind of sorry for them because we figured EA had it locked up. So SSI comes with 6 guys and 10 computers, and they set up in our meeting room, and they already had maze programs all set up. They already had creature images all done. They wanted to do 5 games a year, and they promised us checks of at least 150 grand with each game.
Wow.
Wow is right. Oh my goodness. And so the first box set was Pool of Radiance, and they did it in all the formats possible in those days. It was a huge success. It was the bestseller for the year. We did a module adventure for it, and I wrote novels for it. And so it was just, the company was just a big deal. And for several years, they did great, really great gold box games for us. And the only reason they stopped is because a certain Lorraine Williams got greedy and said, "I think we can make much more money with somebody else." Well, we never did. We grabbed another company. We shoved SSI to the side, which we should have never done. My good friend Chuck Krogel was the head guy there, and he was just a genius designer himself. But we shoved them aside. We signed a different contract, and the new guys never delivered. They did a couple games. They weren't good at all. It was just a bad new situation, and greed killed that marvelous goose that laid the golden egg.
You know, I'm noticing a theme here whenever we have a conversation about Miss Williams. So, um, some more talk from our chat here. Goldbox is by far my favorite computer game. My friend James says. Gaetano, this could be a 24-hour stream, right? And then my wife comes right back on the next line and says, "Ha ha ha ha, no." um, yeah, I can only monopolize so much of Mr. Ward's time. Believe me, I'm just grateful that he's doing this to begin with.
Sure.
A little bit about a little bit going back from the history of your game design and things like that. Metamorphosis Alpha being Starship Warden being such a big thing. Could you tell me a little bit about? I think the story a lot of people may or may not know, but I'd love to hear you tell it in your own words about how you approached Gary and how Metamorphosis Alpha got off the ground and how it
Oh,
actually got in the Dungeon Master's Guide.
okay, sure. So I'm playing Gary's game. It's teaching me how to play D&D, and I'm having the time of my life sitting in Gary's porch playing D&D. But I was a big science fiction fan. So I said to Gary, you need to do a science fiction version of this. And he looked at me and said, and we've been playing games like 3 months. And he looked at me and said, Jim, I don't have time to do it, but why don't you give it a try? So my eyes got real wide. I mean, he had no idea if I could write or not. It's just he just liked my style of play and liked what I was doing. And so I sent him a Metamorphosis Alpha outline of a lost colonization starship. I used Starship by Brian Aldiss
Okay.
as my main idea, and he loved the idea, and I wanted to keep it. I wanted to have D&D fans like it, but for intellectual property purposes, I wanted to be a little bit of ways from D&D. So that's why there's 3d6 in it, and we have mutations and we have radiation. Radiation, of course, was red kryptonite to me in that. So that came out. I started in '74, came out in '76. It was the first science fiction role playing game, and actually the first game ever to be called a role playing game.
Hmm.
So yeah, I know.
That I did not know actually. And how did it get put into the Dungeon Master's Guide?
Okay, this is kind of another little story. So Gary started playing it and he loved it. He would when I was a teacher then, and I would come down in the summer and I'd come down on holidays, and Gary would insist that I come over to his house and run Metamorphosis Alpha because the poor guy he never got to be a player.
Sure.
He was always a dungeon master, so he loved playing. He was a really good player. Oh my goodness, I only killed him once in 40 years. So,
Even in Metamorphosis Alpha?
yeah, I only killed him.
Wow.
I know it's saying a lot.
That is saying a lot, especially when it comes to your reputation too. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
so yeah, I only killed him once. So he said to himself, "Oh, I really like this a lot," and so he liked it so much that he put it in the DMG, but he also did the S1. Is it S1 or S3? What's the expedition?
It's S3 Expedition.
S,
Yeah.
okay, so he did S3 as a result of liking the MA ship so much.
Right.
So I was really proud of that because that thing is just an amazing adventure by itself. And then he had a nice budget, so the art for that is fantastic.
Oh, it sure is, isn't it?
Cool ever.
Yeah, it's really good. It's really good. I would say my favorite interior art is S4, so Lost Caverns of Socav.
Mhm.
Some of the easily work in there is just unbelievable. But
Yes. Didn't we
uh,
have artists working for us? Oh my goodness, we sure did.
Have you got a chance to see the special yet? I have the Beholder.
Yes, I've seen that. Yeah,
Yeah, did you think it was a good representation of how the artists worked back then? And
I thought it was great. I
yeah,
really did. I think he got everything down pat. Usually, I don't like those kind of things. Blackmore came out, and I didn't like that much. It was too much of an artisan. Artisan, you got to give him credit. He had the idea, but Gary definitely turned it into a product.
oh, for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
I think unfortunately what ends up happening a lot is people out there in the community feel like they have to take sides. Like
Yeah,
I'm an artisan guy, I'm a Gygax guy. I think it's
everybody in
important to celebrate
Minnesota,
them both for their greatness.
everybody in Minnesota is an artisan guy. I understand it, yeah, but I saw the whole thing from beginning to end, and that's why I'm a Gygax guy.
Well, again, you're the authority on it. For me, I celebrate them both. I think they're both great men. I think they both contributed a great deal to the hobby we love. So
Hmm.
I think I respect them. I respect them both for their own merits.
There we go.
Maybe that's a little bit too political, but I really don't think it's. I really feel that way. I don't think it's good to take sides like that. I think it's important to celebrate people for what they do and for what they've done, not because you
Yeah.
feel like you have to take a side.
Yeah.
As far as Metamorphosis, or the other, I remember Boot Hill was also put into the DMG. Now, Boot
Mhm.
Hill was kind of an homage to Don Kay's love of westerns, was it not?
No, that's Brian Bloom's
What
love
was
of.
Brian's? Okay.
Yeah, yeah, he's the one that put that together. Did a great job. I remember playtesting that too. Had a riotous time playtesting Boot Hill. Just great fun.
Yeah, absolutely. The early TSR games, it's really hard to beat any of that stuff. Now, you were telling everybody a little bit about what they can expect in future Metamorphosis Alpha products.
Hmm.
Um, what's on the horizon besides the Kickstarter?
Excellent question. Okay, so Goodman Games produces a lot of MA products right now, and they're going to come out with my toughest MA tournament ever. I did it as a tournament product that's super deadly. It's the top of the ship, and you roam around the top of the ship and try to survive. And that comes out late fall. They're going to do a Kickstarter on that. And then the Troll Lord boys are doing this big 600-page book that's all the maps of it's 17 main levels and 16 mid levels between the levels. And I've that's never been printed before. And like I said, it's 600 pages. So
Not
it's,
even on that cutaway, that big black and white cutaway
I'm
map
sorry,
of the Warden.
I don't understand the question.
There was a. I remember that there was a big black and white cutaway poster-sized map of Starship Warden. So this is even more comprehensive than that.
Well, yeah, it's way more comprehensive than that. It gives gigantic details. What the heck? Let me ruin my room here and pull it out.
Okay, I think the audience would love to see that. I mean,
Maybe they'd love to see.
while you're pulling that out, I have a one of my viewers is watching. James mentioned that the Pool of Radiance was his favorite, and he played it in 1989, and then in 2015. Still great 25 years later, waiting for it to load between 5 1/4 discs on the Commodore 64. The tension for the Battle of So-Called Keep.
Yeah, the Commodore 64 was a slow platform, that's for sure. Okay, so that's good. I did that without destroying everything. So this is the book. That's how thick it is. All right. So we can see that. That's good. Now let me just show you one of the maps. I don't know if you'll be able to see it very well, but they're just astounding. Chris Clark just did an amazing job on all of the maps. Come on, where's one? Got 600 pages here. You think I could find one map? All right, let's see if I can get this so that anybody. You probably can't see it at all.
No, but I can see the detail level in it. Holy moly!
Oh, it's amazing. It's an amazing book, I'll tell you. And it's got creatures and it's got items and it's just got everything I've always wanted to put in the book in 600 pages.
Oh my goodness!
Like I said, the Troll Lords are going to do a Kickstarter on it, and I don't know what the price tag's going to be, but you think it's 60 pages or 600 pages, it's going to be some bucks.
What a magnum opus that is!
I know.
I have a discussion. One of my viewers wants to know: will anyone else get the chance to get the Starship Warden back on course like Ernie Gygax Jr. did?
Oh yeah, that person must have heard of that story. So yeah, I just played the game with a bunch of friends from Texas, and Ernie happened to be there. Let me just take a sip of water here.
Sure.
Ernie happened to be there to play, and so they were going through the motions, and they had to find the command module, and the command module is super deadly. I mean, when I say super deadly, super deadly, Ernie managed to walk them through it to get to the main computer. No one has ever, in the 45 years of playing that game, ever got to the main computer. And Ernie is one of the few players who knew the code to have it reboot itself. And so he got in there, he solved the group solved the different problems to get to the main computer. And so Ernie rebooted the whole computer, and now the ship The ship is on its proper course back to the planet it was supposed to go to. And
Fantastic.
I'm thinking if I can last a few years longer, then I'll design the Metamorphosis Alpha planet.
Well, we're going to have to make sure that that happens. Now, you said the Kickstarter for that would be maybe around December?
Yes, for sure. December at Troll Lords. It'll be on the Troll Lord website. They do a great job with Kickstarter starters.
Oh, that's awesome. My friend James is on here saying, so many products and influences that Jim was part of, a river for so many streams. And I think that's, I couldn't put it any better
nice
myself.
phraseology. Tell them well typed.
Well typed, Jim, well typed. Yeah, I think that this is, there's so many cool things like this that you've become a part of. Let me ask you this. All right, hypothetical situation. Tomorrow evening, Castle Entertainment gets the property of Greyhawk. We own it. And of course, the first person I hire is Jim Ward.
Wow.
What are you going to do in the world of Greyhawk to make it the way you would like to see it?
Sure. For sure we have to do Greyhawk City, and for sure we have to do Greyhawk Dungeon. I mean, I've seen Gary's Greyhawk Dungeon. It's an amazing piece of godlike material. That's how good it is. So that if somebody got the IP, that should definitely happen for sure. That we do the dungeon through the city.
And would you now? My understanding is that there's a lot of talk about this right now. That Paul Stormberg, I know you're familiar with Paul. He's a good guy from the community. He has been working lately. He's unearthed a lot of that early manuscript. Have you heard that?
Gail's got the whole manuscript.
Yeah, I know. I know she's got control over it. I didn't know that she had the whole manuscript.
Yeah, she has the whole manuscript. So he might find bits and pieces, but he's not going to find the whole thing. And Gary never did. Gary did a version of Greyhawk City with Troll Lords, but it wasn't really the sweeping expanse that Greyhawk City is. I mean, for me, it's just the most magical place in the universe. That's how big Greyhawk City is. I mean, I can still remember walking the streets and dealing with the people and the thieves and getting gods attacking me and having to go to the Black Tower to get my poor flunky from stone to flesh because he got turned into flesh or stone by a Medusa.
Now, as far as the gods go, my understanding is that very first in the history of Greyhawk, the very first mention of a god was, I think Rob Kuntz gated Odin in with his Robilar character. How did the gods work? You mentioned you were attacked by a couple. How did that work in Gary's game?
Yeah, okay. So they had temples in Greyhawk City.
Okay.
And you could actually contact the dudes if you were. We're going to ignore that phone.
Okay.
You could contact the dudes in the gods if you had a high enough cleric. And so there was the Norse gods, and that Rob brought in.
Right.
But Gary had a bunch of his own gods. He used what is it? Jack Vance's. Oh, what is the name of that book? Anyway, a fantasy book by Jack Vance. He used those gods. Like Kugel the Clever was like a high archpriest of this temple of the club. So Gary invented lots of different things like that.
And that would end up being St. Cuthbert right there.
Yes. Oh, thank you very much, St. Cuthbert of the castle. Yes.
Yeah, and then which is actually I've done a little bit with that myself here in a recurring game that I run at conventions. So that's kind of my homage to that piece of genesis of that part of the campaign. I believe Foltest was one of the Blinding Light was also one of those early gods.
Yes, it was. Ernie had a cleric of Foltest. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so awesome.
So they actually interacted with people. I did a thing called what was it? It was a thing with Troll Lords about the pantheons, and I wanted the gods to interact much more with the people, which I think is in keeping with the fantasy theme. You know, of the gods don't come down themselves and do the work, but they can send avatars to start quests going and to increase their worshippers.
Wow, I like that idea a lot too. I mean, I think one of the things that makes Greyhawk is its amazing roster of all these really cool deities and things like that. So I think that not using them, not using them as a tragedy, and having them interact more with the people it's great. It brings that more to the forefront.
Yep, he was. Gary was definitely influenced by Fritz Leiber, who did a ton of that in his Lankmar books.
Mm-hmm.
The gods were all very close to the people in Lankmar City.
Now you did in Deities and Demigods. Lankmar was a big part of that. And
yes.
So you did the deity design in that as well?
Yes, I did.
Okay, that's awesome. So you didn't have any problem with IP with those guys. I wonder why it was.
We had that license. We had the Fafford and Grey Mouser license at the time.
Oh,
they
I
did
see.
a smart board game, and they did. We did a bunch of one-on-one books and other Fritz Leiber Lankmar books.
I remember. I guess I think of that as being a little bit of a later thing because I remember when the Lankmar actual official book came out from TSR. It was a little later in the game than that. So.
Well, we did the game right away because Fritz had this board game that he did with his friend, Gardner Fox, and so we turned that into a Lankmar board game right away.
Right.
So we had the license so we could. Fritz was really easy to work with. He just wanted checks on a regular basis.
Sure.
One of my proudest moments was we stopped doing this stuff. But one day I asked accounting, we still send any money at all to Fritz? And they said, well, we haven't sent money to Fritz Leiber in 2 years. I said, oh, that's definitely a mistake because we've sold stuff of his in the last year. So I managed to get him a $5,000 check.
Oh, that's nice.
That he wasn't expecting. So I was really pleased by that.
That's awesome. And by the way, again, you trolls out there who want to talk about the man's integrity, let's talk about that for a second. A good friend of mine mentioned here. Dan says Jim's discussion of clerics and deities and the deities and demigods should be required reading for any player running a cleric. I wonder if he thought at the time that clerics weren't being run as cleric-y as they should be.
I absolutely did. Yeah. First of all, for me, it took me a long time to figure out game balance. I never knew why clerics couldn't use swords. I always just kind of shook my head. I asked Gary several times, but it was a game balance thing. Clerics don't use swords. Wizards don't use maces. It's all part of the game balance. It isn't necessarily logical, but I wrote a book, Pool of Radiance, and in Pool of Radiance,
little thing.
What? Yeah.
That little thing? You mention these things so casually.
A bunch of clerics standing around Kern, who's going to become a cleric, and all the clerics show these great big scars on their legs and on their hands and arms, and Kern is given a sword. And he says, I don't use a sword. What's the deal here? We're clerics. We don't use swords. And they all said, we've all used swords once. And so they had all scarred themselves with the weapon to know what it was and how it felt, but then they'd throw it away. And so that's what happened with Kern. He cuts himself and he pitches the sword away, never to use one again.
Another one of my great supporters and dear friends, Anna Meyer, Matt Mistress here, mentions clerics and blunt weapons is the rule in 1E she hates the most. And I know that when you wrote Greyhawk Adventures, it was 2E by then, so you could use especially priests could use the weapons of their priesthood. Did you find that a little bit more appealing as a rule?
I found some pantheons that demanded it.
Yeah.
There was just a couple religions, or not religions. We say pantheons, we don't say religions.
Right.
I'm really in trouble with the people from India. They did not like their Hindu gods used as game pieces.
Oh, well, that's interesting.
They were very mad at me. But anyway, some of the gods, like Kali uses a big sword.
Right.
We had to allow some of it.
Yeah, I mean, how does Tritherian's clerics not use a spear? I mean, it just doesn't make a whole ton of sense. Now,
yes, I agree.
Yeah, I think that's... now, you mentioned before that, and I've asked you this before, so I already know the answer to this, but I think the crowd here might enjoy knowing the answer to this. You mentioned before that you were thinking about doing 2 free pantheons for deities and demigods to replace the ones that were omitted. Which of the 2 would you? What 2 pantheons would you actually include? And I'm sorry, anyone from India that I just used that word. I apologize.
Do an African one for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was looking into Voodoo, and like a Jamaica one.
Like the
Uh,
Loa.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I was going to do those too. But like I said, they didn't let me. I thought they were crazy. I thought they were just crazy. I really wanted to give the value back to the people. They
Sure.
didn't want to do it. It was too much trouble.
Nah, yeah, I think I personally would have loved seeing those pantheons developed. I know I could say that. A friend of mine over here, Anna, goes back and she mentions that Lankmar book, fantastic. Yeah, that thing is awesome. Um, one of my Dan is asking me right now, does Jim know how Gary handled neutral clerics and turning?
No.
Okay. I was going to
Oh,
say, because the rule was that the rule became you could either rebuke them or you could control them if you were evil.
yeah. Well, I never played with neutral clerics ever.
Okay.
We always were. We hardly. In fact, I don't ever remember once playing with an evil cleric or an evil character at all.
Right.
We always usually. Well, I was chaotic good. That really fit my personality. But we didn't do neutral stuff too much at all. Now, I would think there aren't lots of neutral clerics. First of all, Druid's definitely neutral, but he didn't let them turn.
Right. How would you
Yeah.
handle it?
Well, I don't see why they should be able to turn. See, for me, the turning is a statement of intent. So I put up that cross and I put a light behind it so the shadow of the cross hits the vampire. I believe in this. This is what does it. But if you're a neutral guy, you don't have that much. There's no intent there. There's no force. There's no aggressiveness on one side or the other. I really want to be good or I really want to be evil. I can understand them turning or getting undead. But the neutrality thing, I really want to be neutral? I don't think you could touch the undead.
One of my viewers here, Gitano. So you saved your evil for DMing then, huh?
Oh, ouch! Ouch! Oh, you wound me! You wound me!
We were talking about Fritz Lieber and checks, and since we're talking about cash and money, I'd like to talk for a moment about your involvement with the Spellfire CCG. That has to
Sure.
be a hugely proud moment of your career. Tell me a little bit about it, of your experience with it, the reception to it.
Okay, I don't usually tell Spellfire stories, but
You will tonight.
here's the fun deal. So Wizards came out with Magic the Gathering, and we bought it at Origins when it first came out, and it was terrible. The rule book was an 8-point type, and it was chaotic and mixed up. The rules were nasty. The decks that you got were not decks you could use. They were just mixtures of resources, mountains and swamps and things, and creatures, but they weren't connected at all, so that you hardly ever got a deck that you could play. All right, but it sold out at Origins, and then it came to Gen Con, and it really sold out there. I bought a bunch of them at Gen Con, and so I came back to my group, and I said, these guys have got something here. Let's do it. And at first, Lorraine said, absolutely not. We're not going to do it. This is a flash in the pan. It's going to go away. I knew that wasn't going to happen. So finally, I got her to say yes. And I and Steve Winter and Zeb Cook, and who was the fourth guy? Mike Roll, I think. Anyway, 4 of us got together, and we said, well, we have one thing Wizards doesn't have. We have amazing art. Because we had all the covers of all the books. We had lots of interior art. So the art problem was not a problem for us at all. So we looked at what they did. We looked at the rarity thing as something we could easily copy. And so we put together the first Spellfire set. I think it was 240 cards. And they were rare and they were uncommon and there were common cards in the set. And our rules were really nice. They were typeset nice. They looked nice. Has a side note. In that first set of rules, I have the melon rule. And the melon rule states that if you bring a cantaloupe to the gaming table, you got an extra card in your hand. The people at DSR hated the melon rule. I thought it was the most magnificent thing in the whole world.
The
So,
melon rule.
so we came out second. We were the second ones into the industry with this, and they did okay, but they didn't do great. But then we came out with our first expansion set, and I came up with what I think was a brilliant idea. I'm patting myself on the back again. I came out with the idea of photo cards. In Wizards of the Coast Magic, the first sets, it was almost impossible to identify a rare card.
Right.
Unless someone told you it was a rare card, you couldn't tell. But we did all of our rare cards as actual photographs of actors and actresses. Many times it was TSR. We put in a call for lamps and rings and sort of things like that, and then a bunch of us got into costumes.
I was gonna say, don't forget the game designer cards that were in there.
Yes, I was in 44 different cards
Oh.
with either my face or my hands or my body, and it was just riotous fun. And because of that, I think I want to say the Ravenloft was the first expansion set, but it might have been something else. But it sold out in 2 weeks because everybody wanted those rare cards.
Right.
And they could tell exactly what they were because they were all photographs.
Right.
It just worked out wonderfully. It just was great, good fun. We made $30 million gross on that first year of Spellfire.
That's why I brought it up in conjunction with the word cash.
Yeah, 30 million. I think that's the main reason that Wizards bought the company, so they could put a stake through the heart of that game.
So, well, if that's true, actually, and we posit the idea that Wizards saved Dungeons and Dragons, then essentially Spellfire saved Dungeons and Dragons.
I suppose, yeah.
You could look at it from that train of thought. Now, I'm going to I'm having a debate right now in the chat room here, and we're going to have to set something a real serious problem between two of our fine gamers and friends to rest here, Jim. So I need to know what your opinion of gnomes is.
I love gnomes.
You love gnomes.
Is
it true that Gary actually had a gnome illusionist character?
Absolutely. Yep. High level too. But I love Jeff Grubb's gnomes the best.
Okay.
Jeff Grubb's gnomes were technomasters, but it'd make machines, and the machines would do wild and crazy things. So they'd make a machine that would let their kids swing, but it was also a steam cannon. Or they'd make a machine that would cut down a tree, but it would also put tunnels in cliffs. So they were technomasters. I think Jeff's. I mean, I like gnomes a lot. I never use them because they're little.
I'm gonna be honest. Until I started DMing at conventions, I've never in my probably about 40 years of gameplay had I ever seen a player run a gnome. But I included one in there for the sake of inclusion, and it became so popular. I was like, wow, there's this big gnome subculture here in gamers. So
there's the subculture for everything. There's the subculture for Kinder. Kinder are way crazy Dragonlance characters, but people love them for some reason. I never understood.
I think that it's a love-hate thing. I think either people love Kinder or they hate them.
Yes,
one of the two. I know a lot of gamers out there that despise Kinder.
I know a lot that love them to death.
Yep, same thing. I think they're a very polarizing kind of thing.
Yes, I know.
Jim, as far as your entire career of creation, I know you say that the Storyteller's Thesaurus is your masterpiece.
Yes.
But what are you most proud of?
Well,
what would you like everybody, when you're finally gone, to remember you for?
Products. I've done an awful lot of products.
So so being prolific?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I did a novel for Troll Lords called King's Commission. I really love that book. I wish they'd do a sequel, but I can't talk them into it. And sure, Storytellers for sure is wonderful. I mean, Gamma World and MA, the first Gamma World that I did, and MA are things that they're my babies, is what they are. I mean, I kind of don't like the ugly mutation of Gamma World and what it's turned into, but it's kind of it's kind of perfect for what it is.
It is.
Yeah.
I I skipped over Gamma World because I didn't want to talk about Gamma World too much because I wasn't really sure how you would receive that because it's changed so much and I knew it was near and dear to your heart.
Yeah, I never support it with stuff. I support MA with a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Gamma World isn't mine, so it's somebody else's, so they can do whatever they want with it. I'm just glad that I was the first apocalyptic role-playing game designer.
You were the first in a lot of things.
I was the first in a lot of things.
You were a pioneer in a lot of ways. And,
it's just Gary, though. Gary let me get in on the ground floor of just a ton of stuff. I had some good ideas that really worked out well.
If you had a do-over on anything, what would it be?
Ooh, I designed Dungeons and Dragons in 1972.
Huh.
Yeah, I put it out instead of Gary.
Come on now, that's kind of circumventing the question. What are your products that you actually did?
Oh.
If you could redo something, if you could revisit it, what would it be?
Do something? That's an interesting question. I would have made Gamma a little clearer. There's so much fun stuff going on now that I really regret wasn't going on in the past. I mean, websites for games. What a great opportunity that is to touch people. Every single week, every single month. When I talk to these people that I'm doing role-playing games for now, I insist that they get a website and a Facebook page to reach out to people. Right. Man, that would have been so great. I can remember sitting after hours at TSR on my Commodore 64, talking to the various chat rooms on Commodore 64. That kind of touching is just grown so strong and important right now. I don't even think the big boys give it the weight that they should, myself.
Yeah, so absolutely. I think you're right about this. I mean, for example, the video that we're doing right now, we've got a chat room full of people here, but when we mirror it on YouTube, it we'll see thousands of people can see it in the future. It's right. One of those things that can really
get the word out. Yeah,
it'll carry on for in perpetuity. It's a record, so it'll be. I think that's really cool, and I can only imagine what would happen if we had that kind of record of your games with Gary, for example.
Oh yeah, wouldn't that be nice?
If we could look back and we could say.
I think there was one YouTube Gary session, but he was just so wonderful, and I've had a couple of YouTube sessions now myself. But yeah, what a neat thing, to carry it on. I am positive when the first colonization starship goes out into the stars, my game's going to be played on that starship. I'm positive of that.
Now, I'm going to tell you something. I think, having studied your style myself, because as a DM, I think you always need to learn. You need to watch people that you admire. You need to take things from them that they do well. One of the things I admire about your style that I think is really cool that you do, tell people out there in the audience that have never played a Jim Ward game a little bit about the way that you do equipment with you let the players tell you what they have.
Oh, sure.
I think it's a neat mechanic.
This is a fun little feature that I've started doing in my convention games. Everybody comes there and they don't care about their characters. They don't care if they die. That they're only going to play them once. It's no big deal. But I've started so that I give you your character and I give you kind of a background, but then you get to pick 10 things that your character has always used in their adventures. And people love doing that. Oh my goodness, they just think it's so much fun, and they hardly ever use any of the things.
Right.
But they just have a blast doing it, and then after they pick their 10, we all read them. And it's really kind of funny because people will hear good ideas. Like, I'm going to carry 90 feet of rope, and a guy over here will scribble out something and put 90 feet of rope. I'm gonna have a combat knife. And somebody would scribble out a combat knife. That sounds like a great idea. And then when they play the science fiction games, it's always the med kits. Right. They want med kits to heal hit points.
Sure, and absolutely.
People love filling out these 10 things. Oh. And I do the first 15 minutes of every game I play.
And like I said, I think that's a really cool mechanic. I think that's something that gets players into their character more. I mean, it gets them to, especially in the convention environment, like you mentioned. It's a one-shot character. You may never play him again. It's hard to get invested. but
Yeah.
that definitely draws them into playing that character. So I think that that's really cool.
Okay, here you want to hear the worst item that people put on their list?
I would love to hear it.
Porn magazines. I know. I look at these guys and I say, you've got only 10 things to save your life, and one of them is a porn magazine? And they all say, yeah. It's crazy. Role playing for you.
I would consider that to be extremely situational. I have one of our viewers over here asks, did Gary really sit behind a big screen when he DM'd?
Oh, absolutely. Okay, so I'll give you another fun story. I'm playing D&D every Thursday night. We went over to Gary's house to play D&D. And so that night, Gary said, don't use your main character. Use one of your other.
Whenever the DM says that, you got to worry right away.
I had 2 or 3 characters, so it was no problem. I have a favorite elf, Ren of the Blade. He's a half elf wizard thief. And so I was playing him. And in the middle of the adventure, we found this way cool portal that we'd never found before. And so we tested it out because we had lived through the Tomb of Horrors, so we did not want to jump in and die.
Right.
So we threw in a rope, we pulled the rope back. We tossed in a pole, we pulled the pole back. We tossed in a cat on a string, we pulled the cat back. All those things, everything worked fine. So we walked through the
I want to
portal.
know which one of your adventures brought a cat with them. But
Oh,
anyway,
yeah.
go ahead.
I always carried a rose bush because I had a growth plant. Hang on just a second. Janine, that's your phone. Okay, we'll continue on.
Uh-huh.
So we found this portal. We all went in the portal. It was going to be a brand new adventure because we'd gone through like Jack Vance's Deirdre world through a similar portal. So we went in, and Gary stood up and said, Jim, did you bring your Metamorphosis Alpha stuff with you?
Oh, no.
Yeah, Gary, it's in the car. Why? Would you please bring it in here? Well, you do whatever the DM says. So, yeah, sure. So I bring it in, and Gary's sitting in my chair. And Gary points to the DM chair at the end of the table. You're going to be DMing for a little while. Okay. And then Gary explained that we were all our characters, all our fantasy characters, were now on the Starship Warden, and the portal had closed. So there I'm sitting in the DM's chair, and I had to be faithful to the DM part of it, but I was scared to death for my half-elf character. He's in the big hardbound. On level 7, and he's been there for 45 years. I'm talking with the Troll Lord boy, Steve Chenault, about doing a module of Let's Go Save Prince Ren, the elf.
Nice.
And have a fantasy group go on the Warden and try to save him and bring him back home.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness, it was terrible. So we adventured several nights, and I just got more and more nervous. Just more and more nervous as they encountered things. So that's where we kind of came up with the rules of what happens with fantasy characters on the Starship Warden and Starship Warden characters in the fantasy world. So spells always work on the Warden, and mutations always work in the fantasy world.
Okay.
So, and then weapons and things, they just work like normal. And then we had to kind of fudge the armor parts, because when you got like power armor and you're in a force field, it's
a little much.
It's a little much. So that's how we put together those rules where we compared those various things.
Could you tell me a little bit? Now you're behind the table. Okay, you're behind the DM screen right now, and you're looking across at your group.
Yeah.
Remember the moment. Who was at the table at that point in time?
I've tried to remember, and I can't. I know Ernie was there.
Okay, so Ernie was there at least.
Yeah.
We know a little bit about what Gary was like as a DM. What was he like as a player? What kind of tactics did he use? What kind of how would you characterize him?
That's a very good question. He was super cautious about everything, every single little detail. The one time I killed him, he opened a door and 2 tons of fungi fell on him. That was the only time I ever killed him. The only time. He was always super careful. He always was very judgmental. He was a good min-maxer. He would play characters that would have high numbers in certain areas, and he didn't care about the numbers. Okay. So anyway, he was a min-maxer kind of player. Really
Okay.
good. Very, very, very clever.
Now, how was he min-maxing exactly if he was going 3d6 down the line?
Yeah, okay. You can do 3d6 online, but keep in mind like mutations
Okay.
and
Okay.
equipment that adds to the physique of the player character.
Got it.
You know, I had like 8 or 9 different kinds of power armor. So he'd pick a power armor that would work with his character the best, and then he would pick one of the 8 or 9 weapons that would work with that power armor the best.
I understand. I thought the implication was that maybe he was not using a 3d6 going down the line when he was generating the character.
Oh no, there was only one bad time between him and I in generating a character. I had defects in my game.
Right.
Where you pick up a defect and you were supposed to role play, dealing with that problem. Gary refused defects. Every time he got one, he said, that character dies. He'd look at the character sheet and throw it away. Every single time. Oh my goodness. I was really shocked the first time he did it. He refused to have defects. Well,
Wow.
He's if he doesn't want to do a defect, I'm not going to give him a defect. All there on to it. Everybody else played defects. Everybody else, not Gary. Gary wouldn't do it.
Oh my goodness, that's hilarious.
Yeah, I regretted putting in defects later on. I put hemophilia in there as one of the defects, and the hemophilia organization came after me. They hate it in the game. They say hemophilia is not a game product. It's not fun. It's not funny. And I couldn't disagree with them. But yeah, so I was kind of sad about. Sometimes you just screw up,
Yeah, and it was. It's totally unintentional. I do that sometimes with my game design. I will do something and I'll regret it later because I look back at it and I'm like, you know what, maybe that was a little tone deaf. But
yeah.
But you don't, you're thinking about it in one light and as a designer, but you don't really necessarily. It's sometimes hard to put yourself in everybody's shoes at once.
Yeah,
But one thing I think is really funny about that story you were telling about the fungi.
Yes.
I mentioned that I was on the guys from Grog Talk, their show the other day. They do a segment on their show called Incomprehensible Death, in which they run 2 characters, and the scenario is just basically it's your exercise to kill them as a DM.
Okay.
And I buried them under about 2 tons of brown mold. So it's so funny that you did the same thing essentially in Metamorphosis Alpha. I did the same thing.
Gary loved his moles and his green slimes, all that bothersome, his black puddings and his white puddings. I'll tell you, the first time I was in the giant modules, and I ran across the white pudding, and oh my god, that was so scary. It was just terrifying.
Yeah.
We're walking by snowdrifts, and suddenly one's eating you.
Oh my god, yeah, some of those puddings and some of the deadly slimes puddings and the fungi are just so bad. And it's really bad too because a lot of times you can't remember necessarily what their properties are because there's so many of them.
Yep, and they got worse and worse and worse as time went on.
Oh, I don't know that he ever outdid the black pudding or a psionic gray ooze. I mean, how awful can that be?
Yeah, I quite agree.
Yeah. So, with all this, first of all, I want to thank you again for being a member of for actually doing this interview with us. I know the people out here. I'm getting more questions than ever from the crowd. Everybody seems to love having you around. Is there a message you'd like to give the game community, before we sign off, or is there anything that you'd like to say that to kind of wrap things up?
Okay, so just from my experiences, especially early on when only nerds played the game, don't let people denigrate your hobby. Don't put up with it at all. If someone says this is stupid, this is dumb, even if it's a parent, try to explain to them rationally and calmly that this is a fun thing that takes you away from normal life, and there's nothing wrong with that. I got much more well-read because of this game. This game paid the mortgage on my house. I mean, I've gotten a lot out of the hobby, and so giving back a little bit is just a good idea. But don't let people denigrate your hobby. I just emphasize that as hard as I can.
I'm doing something right now as professionally with Castle Entertainment. Um, I never even imagined, I never dreamed I would ever do it. You know, I'm publishing books now. I'm doing live interviews with my heroes. I'm talking to people around the world. I'm flying to different conventions to do things, and it's all because of a game that I loved as a young man. I was 7 when I first started, and I
Yeah.
remember, and I it, it's it's become such a formative part of my life. I'm who I am because of the friendships I've made and the things
Mhm.
I've learned from gaming and reading the books.
Yeah, I'm
And
with.
I told you earlier in the chat, and maybe weren't quite online back then, but you've got 2, 3 generations of people playing this game now that we're the sons and daughters that you never knew you had, Jim.
It's fun.
We're You are a big part of our lives, and we owe you a great debt for becoming the people that we are. And I can't thank you enough for everything.
Oh, thank you very much. That's very kind of you. Very kind.
It's my pleasure to say. Um, I think what we'll do is we'll sign off for right now. I don't want to monopolize any more of Jim's time.
That's because I'm almost asleep.
Yeah, yeah. And I just want to tell everyone in the audience, thank you for coming tonight. Thanks again, Mr. Ward, for doing this. I really appreciate hearing your perspective on things and your history. Um, we'll be doing this again next month. I have a special guest for that month that you're not going to want to miss, another luminary of Greyhawk history. Um, he's kind of a rarity to see talking live, so I hope you guys can all tune in for that. And for Mr. Ward, I'm Carlos Lysing. I'll be signing off right now. Jim, I'll talk to you just for a moment after we go offline here so I can say goodnight. Everybody out there in the audience, good night. Thank you for coming.
Yep.